Welcome to Midlife Matters, where we celebrate women's wisdom and wit. I'm Georgian Lussier, your host, and I am delighted to introduce today's guest, Nancy Brittingham. Nancy is a retired school principal and is now a competitive dancer on the ice and in the ballroom. Nancy's here to share her story with us. Welcome, Nancy.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for coming. Now, you maintain this really busy schedule, as I understand, and you are retired, but you're doing like maybe not 80 hours a week that you were doing as a principal. But first, if you could just start by explaining what is ice dancing. That's a little different way of talking about that. That'd be great.
Well, we all know that the Olympics are coming up very soon, and one of the big events in the Winter Olympics is the ice skating. And I can tell you that there are 4 types of ice skating. There's men's freestyle and women's freestyle, and pairs, and ice dance is the 4th type of ice skating that's going to be shown at the Olympics. And the skating teams are getting ready right now to go over there. I know a little girl who's actually skating for Australia who is on her way over to Sochi next week. So ice dancing is different from pairs because pairs is the skating where the man actually throws the woman up in the air and she spins around and then goes down. Dancing is actually that. It's actually taking traditional dance and putting it into steps on the ice. What I do is the skating that happens before someone gets to the Olympics. Or if you don't ever go to the Olympics, there's still a lot of ice dancing that you can do. And what we have available to us are a series of set patterns of dance put to various tempos: waltz, tangos, foxtrots, sambas, cha-chas, and you learn each of the patterns. And they're uniform, so that if you are in a situation where you're on the ice with other people who know the dance patterns, you can actually do a particular dance with someone who you don't know. And there is quite a large number of folks, a lot of them are my age and even older, who travel around the country and do social ice dancing. So what we've been doing here in Connecticut, a woman who is a fellow ice dancer and I have been running for the last 3 years a social ice dance weekend up in Newington at the Newington Skating Rink in August. And they follow very similar patterns. The folks come in from all over the country. We've had people from Canada. We've had people from Washington, D.C. We had a couple from California one year. And we get together on a Friday night and we go out on the ice and we put the music on and we can all dance with each other because we all know the different patterns. And then we relax and go home and then come back the next morning. We dance all day. We have a dinner dance, and then on Sunday we dance some more. So these folks are doing 11 hours of social ice dancing. Now that's very casual and relaxed and very, very social. The other activity that I do, along with quite a number of folks in Connecticut, is to practice for the ice dance tests. And I equate those to karate belts. They're levels of proficiency that you get judged on by USFS, United States Figure Skating judges, who will sit there with their little clipboards and watch you do your dance pattern to music with your coach, and then they will decide whether it is proficient or not, and they will pass you or not. There are about 24 of these compulsory dances. These are the ones that the folks who we see on television have passed a long time ago, and they've moved forward into more open and free dancing. And they're leveled, and I'm currently working on pre-gold, which means I've passed 15 dances. This is over a 24-year period, I must say. It takes a long time.
Oh, that is fascinating. It is similar to karate, as you've said to me, as you're describing it.
Right.
Now, karate has the different color
so it's
belts.
Right, it's proficiency levels.
Yeah.
So, it's a very technical experience, and I guess I'm the kind of person that really enjoys working on something that's very minute and detailed for a very long period of time to get it just right. because you work on your edges and you're working on your footwork and you're working on your body position. And then when you're with a partner, of course, there's a whole other dimension as opposed to out there skating by yourself.
And I was chatting with you before we started here today about the fact that the New York Times just had an article. Of course, the Olympics are in the news and all different aspects of it. And some people were weighing in on skating as it's evolved in our country and the world, and how the ice shows used to be so popular, and a comment was made that many people who went to the Olympics would then maybe spend a good period of time afterwards appearing in these different ice capades and ice shows. That somewhat has changed, and one person was expressing an opinion that they thought that skating had more or less lost some of the art form and gone more towards the athleticism area of it. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that.
Absolutely. That's one of the wonderful things to explore with ice skating, because it's constantly flowing back and forth between athleticism and art. And it is absolutely true that particularly ice dancing has become increasingly athletic in the last number of years, and we've watched that happen. You can go back and watch an old tape of Torval and Dean, for example, and you can see how musical and lyrical they are and how they're really dancing. Compared to some of the folks competing in Sochi, they will be doing much more sophisticated lifts, more difficult lifts, and more athletic movements. However, anyone can ice dance. You don't have to be an Olympian to ice dance. In fact, there are basic skills programs all around the state, right around here. And they're run by the United States Figure Skating Association clubs, and they receive a beautiful curriculum from the United States Figure Skating Association, all the way from basic skills, little kids who are learning just to stand up, all the way up to adult classes. And there are adult classes for people who might want to check this out and don't feel as though they have any ability. And it's quite amazing what these little programs can do in a relatively short period of time. And so there is a level of skating for anyone who is interested in pursuing it. You may have skated when you were a child and you sort of liked it, and you haven't done it for a while, but you think you might want to try it. There are a lot of places to do that. In fact, I believe there are about 15 skating rinks in the state of Connecticut, if not more.
Well, that's something for our viewers to really
they've
look
built
into.
Quite a few in the last 10, 15 years, and so there is ice there available even for beginners, for those who might be interested in pursuing it.
And then this other area that you dance in is ballroom dancing, and I learned in an article that your college wrote about you, this lovely article, talking about the fact that you compare or you characterize the type of dancing you do as American smooth. I like the way that even sounds.
Well, first of all, the ballroom dancing probably wouldn't have happened at all if it hadn't been for the ice skating. Because I was ice skating off and on as a child, and then some in college, and then when my kids were little, I put them on the ice, and then I began the ice dancing and started doing that regularly. And about 7 years ago, my husband and I joined a recreation department, just a local recreation department program for social ballroom. And we learned the basics. And from there, what evolved was an opportunity for me to begin actually taking private lessons and then actually competing. My husband and I do continue to social ballroom. We go every Thursday night up to Hartford Ballroom.
Very nice.
Which is run by a wonderful woman named Michelle, who teaches you how to do all the steps for all the dances. And there are, again, a number of opportunities for people to do social ballroom dancing here in Connecticut. You could go out pretty much every weekend and find a dance.
So the dances that you learn in the ballroom dancing, are the steps very similar, like you talked about the different types of dances you do in ice dancing? Are they similar?
Well, that's one thing that I love about the fact that I do both, and something that drives me to continue doing both. And that is what I really enjoy is comparing the two disciplines and finding the ways in which they merge and the ways in which they don't merge. Putting it simply, if you're dancing or ice dancing with a partner, what's going on upstairs might be similar. You might be in frame with your partner. But what's going on downstairs is indeed very different. Because when you're on the ice, you're pushing yourself across the ice.
You're gliding.
You're
right.
bending and pushing, so it's really an isometric. On the ballroom, you have to propel yourself across the floor. So the way you move yourself across the floor is different. So there are similarities and there are differences. A waltz is a waltz, regardless of where it is. It's still a 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And the ice dance patterns that are waltzes try to mimic the feeling and the rhythm and the tempo of a waltz, but of course they can't be doing. You don't do the same steps. The steps are obviously different. The competitive ballroom is actually, in my mind, yet a completely different discipline from social dancing. It's a different environment. It's a much more high-powered environment. You're on the floor with people who have been practicing with their pros, and they want to win. I'm not in any of this to win. My goal is to maintain what I've got, and also to continue to do my personal best.
I know when I was in the sport of running, doing road races and so forth, I learned through a cycle of getting to a point where I was comparing myself to other people and then just having to say, wait a minute. You really have the advantage when you're running to know what your time is, under what conditions, on the length of the course, and see how you did relative to when you did previously, and set new goals. And I really did come to embrace that and found that to be very productive for me, as opposed to looking at the people so far ahead or passing you on the way going back.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's no point in getting discouraged about it. It's so joyful to do these activities, and your body feels so good because you're in good physical condition. That's to me what's the most important.
So, how many hours a week do you train?
I train about 10 hours a week.
Okay.
I'm either at a rink or in a gym practicing my dance, or with my dance partner, or social dancing, or lifting weights. The other thing about how good we are when we do whatever it is that we do is a quote from a famous educator that really drives me. And this fellow said that anyone can become reasonably good at anything they want to if they work at it for 10 years. So the idea that you have to give yourself time and be very patient with yourself and watch your progress and your development incrementally and not let yourself become discouraged is something that I've really embraced, and I would encourage anyone who's trying something to do that, because you're always going to get better if you work at it.
That persistency.
Right. And you will never be an Olympian, certainly I won't, but that's not what's important. The other wonderful thing, of course, is the social interaction. I mean, the friends that I've made at skating rinks. Some of these ice dance weekends that we host have folks coming that I've known for 20, 25 years now. And also, a lot of my local skating friends are also ballroom dancers.
Nice.
So we see each other at the rink and also out socially dancing.
So that must have made a very fruitful transition for you from your, as I understand it, 80-hour-plus week as a school principal to having a structured yet more creative, perhaps, or personal approach to your retirement years.
I actually was skating and dancing while I was working, obviously not as often.
Right.
But I was trying to do as much as I could. And I did have my sights on the fact that I would maybe try to launch into a more intense level of exercise when I retired, and I've been able to do that.
That's
I was
wonderful.
determined to do both.
Well, that's one thing I know that career advisors talk to people as they're thinking about post-retirement, is to start, not wait until, I'm going to have all this time, it's just going to be so wonderful, but really be able to have something that you build on. Often works best for people that you start.
I had one other important goal that I wanted to achieve after I retired, and that was to make sure that I was giving back to the community. When I was a child, my parents were very active in the community, and they were always often out doing something, and without really saying it, they had the attitude of, you work hard and you play hard. And I guess without even realizing that they were really training me to value the importance of giving back to the community, they were showing me that. While I was working in education, that is, of course, a labor of love, and you don't really have a whole lot of time to give in other ways. But I have found my own place to do that now that I'm retired. One of the first things I did when I retired was to make sure that I connected with people who I hadn't had a chance to connect with for a long time because I was just too busy, particularly people who were in need or old friends of mine who maybe had some illness and I wanted to keep in touch with them, and I have been able to do that, and that's been lovely. And that's a way of giving to the community. And I think that everybody has to find their own little way of giving to the community, and I've realized that it can happen in a wide variety of ways. Me, I organize things. That's just what I do. So I organize a nice dance weekend. It's social and it's fun, but it is a form of community service. And I'm also on the board of the Yale Figure Skating Club.
Okay.
And so I serve to help them run their basic skills program every year. And we have run 2 basic skills competitions, which are entry-level competitions for the little kids who their first experience. We just had our second one.
So let's talk about your educational career a little bit. And I understand it was not a straight line. If you could talk about some of those decision points of when you were in the private school sector and then moving to the public and step sideways, whatever, to get forward. And that'd be great.
Well, my training, my bachelor's training was in elementary education, and I knew I wanted to be a teacher, and so I went straight through and became a teacher. In those days, it was a little bit easier to get a teaching position than it is now for folks. And I taught up in Boston, and then I got married and moved to New York and taught elementary school there. And then my husband and I came back to Connecticut, and I went on to get my master's degree. And from there, I moved into a private school and worked in private school for a number of years, again as a teacher, and then had an opportunity in the private school to do some administrative work. So I spent some time doing administrative work in the private school and decided that I wanted to explore public school administration. And so in order to give myself some time to go back and get the second master's degree and to get my feet back into the public sector, I actually, some people would consider this moving backwards. I went from an administrative post in a private school back into a third grade classroom, which was wonderful. And I never really saw it as moving backwards. It was what I had to do. Our friend Susan says that a career isn't a ladder. It's it's a jungle gym.
Susan Sandel.
Yes. You have to go. Sometimes you do have to go backwards to go forwards. And dancing and ice skating mirrors that, because in order to go forward, sometimes you have to go backward a little bit. You have to back up to the technique to maybe get forward in a particular dance or a move you're trying to do. It happens all the time. So you see that connection happening. So I went back into the classroom, got my second master's degree, and then landed a principalship. And I spent the last 14 years of my 39 years of work as a principal. And I've been retired for 5 years.
So did you have any points where you wondered if you would ever accomplish what your goal was to become in administration in the public school system? I mean,
if I ever doubted it?
Yeah, if you thought, I don't know that this is really going to happen the way I hope.
Well, I had a lot of interviews. It took a few years. It didn't happen right away.
Right.
And it had moments of being pretty discouraging because it's a tough road. First of all, I was in a classroom trying to move into an administrative position. So I worked at it incrementally. I broke it down into little pieces. I got a position as the first director of a summer program in a public school. So that went on the resume. And I got to the point where I would, if I got a rejection letter from someone, I would just look at it and put it away and move on.
Wonderful. So not dwelling on it, saying, okay.
You can't dwell on it.
You can't.
If you're trying to achieve a career goal and you're not getting there, the worst thing that you can do is to get discouraged. And the second thing is you cannot take any of the rejection personally, because it really isn't about you. It's about where you are in relation to the other people who are trying to get there too, or in relation to the position itself and what the position needs. And it isn't something that you really need to take personally, although that can happen and it can drag you down.
Did you find networking was important? Did you?
Yes. I was interviewing and searching for 3 years, which is a relatively long time. And one strategy that I employed, when I got discouraged, I started, I would do one thing every day toward my goal. So I would go to school and work and do my little job in the classroom, and then I would do one thing. It might be one phone call, it might be one networking piece, one letter, look at the newspaper, just one little thing to sort of keep me going. And slowly and surely, I started having more interviews, and then I began getting called back more frequently, and the rate of return started happening, and then it eventually was the right fit.
Well, that's a very inspiring description, I'm sure, for people who are watching, because so often those little steps can seem like a little drip in the big pond.
Well, and especially today, everything we hear about so many people who are out of work, and the numbers that have just come out saying that the numbers aren't even necessarily correct because of the people who have stopped looking.
Just stopped looking, right.
So to the people who are discouraged about trying to find work of any kind, my strategy is to find one thing you can do every day, no matter how small it is. If it's one phone call, one conversation, one piece of reading material, one page of a book, anything, just to sort of keep the little fire burning.
And the momentum. Right.
And the momentum going. That helped me to fight the frustration.
Wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for reflecting on that. And we both grew up at a time when women's roles were not anywhere in the scope of what they are today, right? I mean, in the article at your college, they talked about quoting you as saying, you know, kind of the nurse-teacher thing, right? And was your dad an attorney, like a Philadelphia lawyer? Am I correct in remembering that? Okay, so you did crack a glass ceiling in a way, right? By becoming an administrator.
I suppose some people would think that.
Some people might think that.
It was clear in my childhood that if I was going to work at all, mind you, I grew up in the 50s, if I was going to work at all, instead of get married and raise a family, that I would be a nurse or a teacher. And so I, as a child, really never had any other expectations because the seed was never planted there.
Okay, so where did all this come from?
So,
well, you became a teacher, but you were very driven also to excel.
Well, so I became the teacher. Of course, I became the teacher because that's what I was supposed to do, and that was the right. And it felt right at the time. It was right at the time.
Okay,
it was because that's where the opportunities were for me at the time.
Right.
But then the world changed too. As I was going through my teaching career, the world was changing, and more women were going into public school administration. So the opportunities were opening up for me. It wasn't like I created them. They were sort of there for me.
It sounds like you had a good eye to what potential opportunities were emerging.
Right.
And challenged yourself perhaps to think bigger or different.
Right.
And you did have, in addition to your career, a family, right?
I did.
You did get married, as you talked about, and I understand twins.
We had twins.
Yeah.
And so I was teaching while they were growing up. I went back for my administrative master's degree when they were 8 years old. But I did that because my husband was, a real partner in the family and was really helping me out there. How did I do that? Well, I don't really know as I gave much thought to the fact that I was having trouble because I was a woman. I was just thinking about the challenges of moving into another area that came with the territory. It was a new field, and I was the new person on the block, and I had to work my way in, and I just worked hard and pursued it and just kept at it.
I know you've been retired 5 years, but as the principal, I'm sure you were involved in attracting and retaining teachers was part of what was on your plate, right? Did you see a shift in people's expectations, do you think, as far as women coming into the field and what they were maybe shooting for? I mean,
in terms of administration?
Yeah, I mean, did you see yourself at all when these women were coming through? Could you think?
Yes.
Yeah.
In the course of my career, I really, in the field that I was in the field of public school education and private education, I saw that community really got beyond the male-female issue. And it wasn't really an issue any longer in the second half of my career. It was, let's find the best person for the position. And whether that person was a male or a female was irrelevant, really.
I mean, I had some similar experiences going into a corporate environment. It's not that anyone explicitly said women can't do certain things, but I was part of that boomer generation that en masse was coming in with degrees and getting advanced degrees and taking on management jobs. And I would also say I didn't focus on what constraints I had, but rather what opportunities were there. And I have been reading this book called Necessary Dreams by Anna Fels, F-E-L-S. She's a psychiatrist who reflects on her own experiences, listening to her patients and research. And she does a beautiful job, a little academic but very readable. I guess it was a bestseller maybe from 2006, talking about the importance of, for women, having that encouragement about expressing ambition, developing mastery, and having recognition for their accomplishments outside of the inner circle of the personal realm, and that how important that can be to really have a very fulfilling life, and that still is a little lagging as far as women being even comfortable saying they're ambitious, for example, because that's more kind of ascribed to men. So I read that and I say there's kind of those sub-messages in the culture that most of us maybe don't focus on, but I love listening to what you're talking about in terms of the mastery, whether it was with your profession that you developed or in your very disciplined, competitive and just social dancing on the ice and in the ballroom. And that sense of mastery, I'm sure, has been very rewarding for you, and being able to give back in a community sense.
Well, I'm thinking now, one support that carried me through was always the people for whom I was working. And I was always receiving the support that I needed to move forward.
Wonderful.
And in the school district, the superintendent was not discriminating against whether a position should belong to a male or a female. And so that filtered down and made it easier for us to do that. And then I tried to do the same thing when I was hiring teachers or staff.
Well, Jean, this has been wonderful, Nancy. We're going to need to close, but you have so much interesting, inspiring messages for people, and I'm just so thankful that you came on. I'd like to close with a little quote for all of us who perhaps aren't going to be quite as disciplined about our extracurricular activities or post-retirement. And this is from Oprah. And she says, "Every day brings a chance for you to draw in a breath, kick off your shoes, and dance." So you're a perfect example of that, and I just want to thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.